Well, hey guys, I'm Lina Abujamra. If we haven't met before, I run an organization called Living with Power Ministries, and SheGivesHope.com is our website that talks about a lot of the work that we're doing in the Middle East. And if you are connected at all or have heard me in the past, you know that we do a lot of work with Syrian refugees in the Middle East, in my home birth country of Lebanon. Now, I moved when I was 15, and we've been going back until this last year with COVID and all that's been happening. We've been going back every 3 or 4 months and doing medical clinics there. I'm trained in pediatric emergency medicine. And so we have had just a lot of opportunities to do a lot of work with Syrians so far. I have an awesome opportunity today because I'm introducing you to a friend of mine. She's actually on the screen here. Her name is Andrea Haddad. There's a lot that's been going on in the Middle East, as there has been in the world. And so we just wanted to bring you up to speed. We're right now in the middle of a campaign to help a new crisis in Lebanon. Lebanon is a country well-versed in crisis. We in the United States are now accustomed to what's happening with COVID. And so we're sort of starting to understand what global problems are. Lebanon has had that practice for a while, but they are right now facing something that is very unique, something that they have not faced before, at least in a very long time. And it is the problem of a famine. And I'm mentioning Lebanon because though the last few years our work has been focused on the Syrians and who had come to Lebanon because of the ISIS and the disaster in Syria, now not just the Syrians are suffering, but the Lebanese are going through their own crisis. So Andrea is a Lebanese doctor. She just graduated from medical school, and I'm sure your parents are very, very proud. And so I wanted to bring you on because you are going to be a very integral part of the work we're doing this coming year. And it sort of worked out in a very surprising way. Tell us a little bit about what's happened in your life the last few months and how excited you were about med school and sort of how your plans have changed because of COVID.
Well, hey, Lina, it's a great chance to be here with you today. I graduated about a month ago, and I had previously finished my electives at MD Anderson in March, and I was planning to go there for a fellowship of research before residency. However, God seemed to have different plans for this year, as you had just mentioned, and here we are.
So you knew you wanted to be a doctor when we started coming to work in the clinic 6 years ago. You were still in college, but you had a thought that you wanted to be a doctor, and we saw you get into medical school and go through the grueling process of 4 years of med school. And so you, even as of a few months ago, did you know what specialty you wanted to do, or was this a plan to go to MD Anderson sort of buying you a little time to figure out what specialty to be in, or were you planning to transition to the US to do your residency here? Which, by the way, is a very common thing for Lebanese doctors, correct?
Yeah, that's definitely. Okay, so yes, you had mentioned at the start that you had seen my whole process. I was inspired to be a doctor, seeing how tangible the help doctors can give, especially seeing a lot of teams come in and out of our church, and just like how tangibly they can help people, even with language barriers and with culture barriers. And so that was what inspired me to be a doctor in the first place. So after 7 grueling years of asking God, like, are you sure this is for me? Are you sure I'm good enough for this and I can do this? I finished, and he has been surprising me with plans that he had, like, well, he had all along.
So MD Anderson, so that was put on hold because of COVID. Like, so they told you basically you've got to wait a year, or what was kind of, how did that translate to you? Did you get a letter and said, man, your plans have changed, you can't come and do this?
Well, given the uncertainty with COVID, I don't have any like clear answers. I'm just waiting for things to settle down before I know what the future holds in that regard.
How has COVID impacted Lebanon? As you were finishing med school, you saw you were in the 4th year of medical school, so you're rotating between March and graduation is usually the end of June-ish. So was it scary for you to be in the hospital then?
Well, my hospital did a great thing where they quarantined and they changed one building to hold specifically only COVID patients, and so that limited our exposure to COVID patients. However, a lot of my rotations got canceled. We had a lot of online work instead. We had to sit at home and finish really the last couple of months medical school at home.
Wow.
Um,
That's interesting. And so you had this open year. And so what was your plan? What you were doing some volunteering already?
yeah, yeah. Well, first, I'm someone who likes to plan ahead. I have the next 6 years planned, and having to sit at home with nothing to do was very difficult. And so, definitely, God was taking me on a crash course of like trusting Him and looking to Him for the better plan. And so, He already like provided. Some kind of work. So there is this society that is also a Christian society that wanted to help believers who are unable to buy their meds. And so we've been doing clinics, and really that has given me a chance to see the need in Lebanon. Like people are unable to supply like their basic needs, let alone their medicine.
Well, and that's
And
a new
so
story. But before we get into too much of sort of what you've been doing and what we were planning to do, because this is really the story right now, is something changed in Lebanon in the last year. Can you sort of bring us up to speed on that? Starting with the
yes.
revolution and the economic crisis, and sort of how does that translate into what's happened to the people in Lebanon?
Starting October, like people in Lebanon have revolted against our corrupt government. So we have had the same government since probably the time you left Lebanon. We've had the same people in power, and we've had different sects fighting over the rulership and power, and people decided to revolt, and then that just took the country from worse to worse. Banks closed, people have lost their money.
Yeah, so with COVID, a lot of the import of food has sort of stopped. And so the translation of all of the internal crisis, the political problems, the COVID factor, and then the already bad economy in Lebanon kind of worsening is that there now is what I understand is a country near, if not in collapse, and an economy that is probably the worst or the top two worst in the world. And so what does that mean for the average Lebanese family? Because the medical needs that are growing are really not now just with the Syrians, but Lebanese who used to be able to manage can no longer manage. So what does that look like for people? So I understand the dollar or the Lebanese pound has dropped by 80% in value. So a dollar used to buy you like 4,000 liras or 5,000. Is that, what is it now? Or it used to be 1,500.
So a dollar would get you a lira and a half. So a lira right now it's about 8 liras plus. Basically, Lebanon imports all of their goods, and right now the amount you get paid from your work cannot cover your basic needs. And so actually yesterday I was in a church, and I was talking to an elderly woman, and she was saying, I have cut meat out of my diet. I have cut out every protein from my diet. However, I can't cut out the medicine, and like I need somewhere to get my meds from.
So what are people
And
eating?
right now,
Bread, rice, like what are the staples? Because the prices have gone up by 50, 60% is my understanding.
yeah, actually the government has started encouraging people to grow vegetables in their backyards, and a lot of people
I'd be in trouble because I
the
can't do any
situation.
planting. Like how are you supposed to do this, but it's a desperate situation.
It is. Lebanon has never been in such crisis before. Even in civil war, things economically were better than they are right now.
Are people leaving the country? Because the other layer to it is that young people are sort of facing a crisis of not knowing, like you said, you didn't know what to do this year. Many people have no jobs and no ability for a future. So what are the 20-somethings who are graduating from college, well-educated, still living with their parents? How are they dealing with this stress mentally and psychologically?
For sure, everyone is aiming to leave, if not, if they haven't already started applying for visas and trying to get out of the country. It's just very clear that there is no future right here for 20-somethings. So yeah, mental health has gone down like tremendously amongst my friends, amongst my environment. People are really struggling because it's a crisis of hope above all else.
Right, right. And that's our heart, is to bring hope. And so do you feel people are more open to the message of Jesus and hope, or are they sort of beyond that at this point? How are you finding that even
For
conversation?
sure. Actually, that is the only like positive thing in our time right now. Like we have served, my family has served in Lebanon, in Zahle specifically, for about 14, 15 years now. And we have had an amazing ministry with refugees of all backgrounds, but never once but at the size that it is now with Zahle people, so Zahlawiye. Right now, people from Zahle are coming to the Lord by in an amazing amount, and it's just like amazing to see how the Lord has put His hands on this town right now, and it's a privilege to watch, to be honest.
It's so interesting because people are always like, struggle with how does suffering, why does God allow suffering? And it's such a big question. But my experience, and I think yours, we've seen sort of the opposite, having grown up in the war and even now watching the Syrian crisis. I grew up in the Lebanese civil war back in the 70s and 80s. I was in Lebanon, and then watching the Syrians, and now what's happening to Lebanon. Really, suffering has an effect that draws people to God because you have no other hope. And we're seeing this so much. And so it's driven you. And so where our roads intersect is that because you have this gap year, I'm going to call it, which makes it a lot better than COVID crisis, you sort of puts you sort of in the driver's seat a little bit. But God has positioned you to where now you've been doing a little volunteer work with some of the organizations on the ground, but you're going to step in and help us with our medical program, which really we have this part that's been serving the Syrian refugees, which is continuing. Our nurse Sareen is doing work on the ground, and we're hoping to, in our campaign, we're hoping to continue to raise funds for medicines, because we used to show up from Lebanon every few months from the US and give her all of the meds that we would bring with us. And we no longer have the ability to do that because we haven't been able to travel since September of last year. And so we continue to work with Sareen. We continue to hope that she's going to restart the program with the nurses' aides. But now God has allowed us to work with you. And I don't know how this, I think there was a lot of different factors that led to this, but I think your dad was a bit of the genius behind it. But he's always been sort of thinking of, hey, how else can we help? And we were conversing on the phone a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks ago, and we sort of had this aha moment of, why isn't Andrea helping us run the clinic? You are now officially a doctor. As far as I'm concerned, you've seen one, you've done one, and now you can teach one, is the motto for most doctors. And so tell us about like what you and I have talked a lot, and so tell us what you're going to be doing with us with Living with Power. You're going to be starting the medical clinic. So talk a little bit about that.
I am super excited about that because I honestly see the need on the ground. People are going without like really needed medical attention and medicine. So what we've been talking about is doing like one clinic day per week where you're a phone call away, so that in case I need an attending, I can call you. And we're going to be opening our doors for Lebanese for the first time, because generally the clinic sees a lot of Syrian refugees, a lot of Palestinians maybe, but and a very few number of Lebanese. But right now we're starting this clinic for Lebanese people, so that we'd be like going for acute stuff and maybe some minor chronic issues. And I believe it's gonna make a big difference.
Yeah, and it's funny. I
And
mean,
it's
we're
just
not obviously, yeah, we're not asking people to show their papers. It's funny when you hear the Lebanese or the Syrians. The idea is we've raised funds for the Syrian refugees so far, and
oh for
to be
yeah,
completely open with our
no,
donors.
for sure.
Yeah, but just to clarify for those of you who are watching, the idea is just that we now want to see everyone's in need right now. There used to be a higher need with the Syrian refugees, and we're now in a place where this country has everyone in crisis. And so we're stepping up the plate. We're going to continue the work we're doing with the refugees and in the clinic that we have, and we're starting a new clinic now that really aims at helping people who might in the past not have seen themselves as, well, I'm not going to go get aid, and now everyone's like, man, I need help. And so we want to help with two big areas. We're raising extra funds for food and for meds, and so that's where you really come in. You're going to run the clinic. You're now raising a team. You're setting up systems. Like, the blessing is that we have knowledge of that because we've been doing it for a while, and you're working with Sareen and others. How big is your team? You're working on getting a couple of other people, as I understand it, Andrea, is that right?
Yeah, no, definitely what you said first. I think the difference now is that Lebanese people are coming for help, and that's the only difference. Of course, we wouldn't be like screening people according to their nationality. Yes, we've been starting a team. I've been setting up, so I am not a very great IT whiz. My brother is, so I'm setting up a new charting system with him. He's helping with that, and we have reached out to a nurse who's gonna be doing the triaging and the just like figure the taking the vitals at the door and that kind of thing. And I've also reached out to a pre-med who's gonna be like assisting and like running and like helping like run labs and do that the the
Yeah,
paramedic aspects of stuff.
that's
So
awesome.
I'm truly
When are you,
excited
when
about
is
this, and
the
like I'm
start
trying to
date?
figure.
Have we committed to August, or do you have a start date in mind? We're trying to go as
Yes,
soon as
hopefully
possible.
August.
August is
The
it?
first
Yeah, we're
Friday
gonna.
of August.
Yeah, I think so. This is our goal basically. And so we've talked about different dates, but I think August, somewhere in the next couple of weeks, we're gonna launch this. So we've already raised funds. We continue. We still have a need. We want to support the clinic for 1 year to begin with. And so our website, and in fact, I really just wanted people to see you, to get a feel for you. Basically, we've tried to break down some numbers. If you were to give $30, here's what this would cover. Here, $50, here's what this would cover, etc. As little or as much as you can give listeners to this interview. We want to make the most of this season, and our plans have changed. I was planning on being in Lebanon this summer. You were planning on being in the United States, and everyone's plans have changed. Many people who are watching this maybe had planned to go do a mission trip somewhere and yearn and long to make a global impact. Well, here we can, and God has positioned you in this time, for such a time as this, as the book of Esther says. I mean, God literally has graduated you from medical school in this perfect time to have. I know you're nervous about running the clinic, and so I'm excited to help from this side. I have full confidence in you. In my mind, if you've graduated med school, you are now a doctor. You no longer have any excuses. So I'm excited about what God is going to do.
Knows that that's not
No, listen, it's going to be such a great learning experience. I know how scared I was after not just medical school, but coming out of my fellowship in pediatric ER, how nervous I was. So I appreciate that. But I really believe that there's no accidents in God's economy. And not just to hear what God is doing spiritually, but to see how he's going to use this tangible gift of medicine that he's put on your life is so exciting to me. So I know that you really don't love video interviews. You were nervous, like you were just talking about that. I mean, you don't want to be on video, but we are so appreciative. I want to bring you back in a couple of months to talk about sort of what's happening in the clinic. I think for us, like just hearing sort of what's happening on the ground, maybe you can share pictures when the clinic starts. It just helps us sort of see what we're already praying for. We're praying for you. We're praying for the church there. Our hearts are partly in Zahle and the work that's happening there. So how can we pray for you, Andrea, as we wrap up maybe this first interview? How can we pray for the clinic, for you, for the church? Any specific needs come to mind?
For wisdom and just like knowing how to run things and being for him to give me words to speak to the patients and just like to show them his love.
Amen. And I know that's sometimes when you're in the middle of it and there's anxieties and responsibilities, you really rely on God in those moments and the prayers that people are offering for you. We're praying for that. We're praying that God will raise up all the financial needs that we have, but more so, it's what I found is the spiritual need for the staff, for you, for the people who are around you, for Serene, and for the church. They're feeding thousands. We're just doing a small part of the work happening in the church and ministry that you're involved with. And I always sort of feel such a privilege that our ministry can partner with the work happening there. But I'm always reminded there's so much happening and we cover our piece of the pie. So you who are watching right now, you might say, well, I can only give a couple of dollars or $5 or $10 a month. It's not the amount. Remember the widow in the New Testament with Jesus who gave them one mite, and she was commended because she gave sacrificially, compared to the rich people who were given out of the abundance of their riches. So God doesn't look at quantity, he looks at your heart. And so we appreciate, even if you can just pray for this work. If you want to find out more about all that we're doing in Lebanon with Syrian refugees, go to livingwithpower.org/global. You can actually give there as well if you prefer to write a check. We have an address for our ministry. And really, that's all I want to say about that aspect of it. I really wanted you guys just to put a face to our doctor. I thank you again for your willingness to step up and your faith in him, and also seeing how he's changing you and drawing you closer to him as you continue to step out by faith. So I'm also going to pray that God will direct you to next year as you continue to, think about the plan for next year, that God will just guide you specifically to the right place and the right residency in his right timing. So we love you. We're grateful for you. And that's all we got. So thank you for showing up today, guys. We'll come back and catch you later. In the meantime, livingwithpower.org/global. That's the site. You can find out a lot more about the ministry and all that we're doing in Lebanon.